heavy rain poured down in relentless torrents, transforming the once peaceful fields into a churning sea of mud and water. Rex, a German shepherd who had once served as a loyal watchdog on a quiet farm, wandered aimlessly across the flooded expanse. His fur, soaked through, clung heavily to his body as he searched for food. The old farmhouse that had been his home for so long was now nothing but a distant memory. His owners had moved to the city, leaving him behind. Rex had tried to follow them, but the city streets were strange, loud, and far too crowded. He couldn't find his way. As days turned into weeks, his once pristine coat became matted, and his hunger grew. The familiar sights and smells of the farm were a distant echo in his mind. And now, the only thing that remained was the desolate field before him. It had been his kingdom once, a place where he had guarded the gates of the farm with unwavering loyalty. But now, it was just an empty wasteland, flooded by the relentless rain. Rex's ears perked up at the sound of rushing water nearby. He looked around in confusion. The floodwaters had begun to creep closer, seeping into the fields and threatening to swallow the land whole. His paws, once sure and steady, slipped in the slick mud as he tried to move toward higher ground. But there was no higher ground to be found. The rain had drenched everything, turning the landscape into a vast, unrecognizable marsh. With each step, the water seemed to rise faster, pushing against him. Rex fought to stay on his feet, but the current was too strong. The rush of the water grew louder, filling his ears with a deafening roar. Panic began to take hold of him. He had never faced anything like this before. Before Rex knew it, the water swept beneath him, pulling him into its strong, merciless grip. He struggled, his legs flailing in vain as the current carried him away. He tried to paddle with his front legs, but it was no use. The floodwaters were too powerful. In that moment, Rex thought he might drown. The waters seemed endless, the dark swirls of the river closing in around him. He felt himself slipping under the surface, gasping for air, struggling to stay afloat. His heart raced with fear. He couldn't let this be the end. But just as he was about to succumb to the water's pull, a massive piece of driftwood appeared before him, floating on the surface. With all the strength he had left, Rex managed to latch onto it. The force of the current still tugged at him, but the driftwood gave him something to hold onto, a lifeline in the midst of chaos. Exhausted and cold, Rex clung to the wood, his paws barely able to grip its surface. The rain continued to fall in sheets, and the sky seemed to grow darker with every passing second. The floodwaters surged all around him, but the driftwood was his only anchor to survival. He had no choice but to hang on. Through the haze of rain and water, Rex heard something faint, a distant sound that seemed to cut through the roar of the flood. A bark. Maybe? No, it was a human voice. He tried to focus, his tired eyes straining to see through the downpour. A figure appeared on the horizon, driving toward him through the rain on a tractor. It was a farmer, his silhouette outlined by the tractor's headlights. Rex's heart gave a leap of hope. He barked weakly, his voice barely audible above the din of the storm. The farmer's tractor slowed as he noticed the dog clinging to the driftwood in the flooded field. At first, it seemed like a hopeless situation, but the farmer didn't hesitate. He could see the dog was in desperate need of help. The farmer turned off the tractor and climbed down. He squinted into the rain, scanning the field. Rex barked again, his voice hoarse but determined. He couldn't be sure, but he thought the farmer had heard him. With quick, purposeful steps, the farmer waded into the floodwaters, his boots sinking into the mud. The current was strong, and the water reached up to his knees, but he didn't slow down. When the farmer reached the driftwood, he didn't waste a second. He stretched out his hand toward Rex, who was barely clinging to the wood now. The dog, weak and exhausted, managed to nudge closer to the farmer's outstretched arm, instinctively trusting him. The farmer grabbed the dog by the collar, gently but firmly, and began to pull him toward the shore. Rex's legs trembled, but he managed to stay on his feet as the farmer led him out of the rushing water. The strain of the current, the cold, and the fear had taken a toll, but Rex knew he was safe. He looked up at the farmer with wide, grateful eyes, as if thanking him for saving his life. The farmer gave him a reassuring pat on the head, smiling through the rain. "Good boy," the farmer murmured, leading Rex to a dry spot on the edge of the flooded field. The rain continued to fall, but for Rex, the storm was over. The rain had finally begun to ease, leaving only a soft mist lingering in the air. Rex sat on the dry patch of ground, still trembling from the cold, but his heart was no longer racing with panic. He was alive, safe. The farmer, who had led him out of the floodwaters, now knelt down beside him, wiping the water from his face with the sleeve of his jacket. Rex's body, though exhausted, began to relax. The farmer smiled softly, his hands gently brushing through Rex's wet fur. "You're a tough one, aren't you?" he said, more to himself than the dog. Rex gave a small wag of his tail, exhausted but grateful for the attention. The storm had taken so much from him, but this kind stranger had given him a chance, perhaps a second chance at life. After a few moments, the farmer stood and glanced back toward his tractor. "Let's get you out of this weather and into some dry clothes," he said. Rex, still too tired to protest, obediently followed as the farmer led him toward the tractor. The drive was short, but every bump in the road made Rex feel more and more at ease. The warm rumble of the engine beneath him was a welcome contrast to the freezing cold he had endured in the flood. The steady rhythm of the tires on the gravel road began to lull him into a sense of comfort. When they arrived at the farmhouse, Rex could see the barn in the distance, the lights inside glowing warmly against the dark sky. The farmer, who had been quiet for most of the drive, turned to him and gave a small nod. "You're safe now, boy. I've got a warm place for you to rest." The farmer led Rex inside the barn, where the scent of hay and animals filled the air. Rex's eyes wandered, taking in the sights and sounds of his new surroundings. A few chickens clucked softly in the corner, and a couple of cows stood in their stalls, their large eyes following Rex as he entered. The warmth inside the barn was a stark contrast to the chill he had felt in the flood, and for the first time in weeks, Rex felt a spark of comfort. The farmer called out to his children, who had been waiting eagerly for his return. "Kids, come meet our new friend," he called, and soon, a group of excited children came rushing into the barn. There were 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl, around the ages of 8 to 12. Their eyes widened with excitement when they saw Rex. "He's huge," the boy closest to Rex said in awe, reaching out his hand slowly. Rex, still feeling cautious, gave a small bark but didn't move. The boy hesitated for a moment, then gently stroked Rex's fur. "It's okay, big guy," he said softly. The girl, who was a little younger, bounced up to Rex, her eyes sparkling with joy. "Can I pet him?" she asked eagerly. The farmer nodded, and the girl reached out her hand, gently touching the side of Rex's face. He gave a soft wag of his tail in response, still unsure but beginning to trust the warmth of these new faces. The other boy stood a bit further away, watching with a quiet smile. Rex's heart swelled with a strange sense of peace. The family's warmth was like a blanket around him, comforting and safe. He had been alone for so long, drifting through the floodwaters and the empty fields. But now he had found a place where he belonged. The farmer watched the children interact with Rex, smiling at the bond forming before his eyes. "Well, Rex," he said, rubbing the dog's back, "I think you've got a new family now." Rex lifted his head, his eyes searching the faces of the children, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. These were kind people, and maybe, just maybe, this could be his new home. The barn, though simple, felt like a sanctuary after the storm. It wasn't just a place to hide from the rain. It was a place where he could feel needed again, a place where he could find purpose. The farmer led Rex to a soft bed of straw in the corner of the barn. "Get some rest, boy," he said. "You've had a long day. Tomorrow we'll get you a proper meal, and maybe a little more warmth." Rex lay down, his tired body sinking into the straw, his eyes slowly closing. He felt the warmth of the barn around him, the soft murmur of the animals nearby, and the gentle presence of his new family. It was a peace he hadn't known in a long time. As the children continued to circle around him, gently petting him and speaking softly, Rex's mind drifted. He was no longer a stray, lost and forgotten. He was no longer a watchdog with no one to protect. He had found something even more precious than a home. He had found a purpose. The family would need him, and in return, he would give them everything he had. In the quiet of the barn, Rex let himself finally rest, knowing that tomorrow, his new life would truly begin. The following morning, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a soft golden light through the barn's windows. Rex stirred in his straw bed, his muscles aching from the strain of the previous day's ordeal. The memories of the floodwaters still lingered in his mind, but as he opened his eyes and looked around, he realized he was no longer alone. The warmth of the barn, the peaceful sounds of the animals, and the soft chatter of the children filled the air. It was a world far different from the one he had known during the endless days of drifting, cold, and hunger. The farmer had already risen early and was in the process of mucking out the stalls. His movements were steady and calm, a man accustomed to the routine of farm life. The children were outside, their excited voices calling to each other as they ran around the yard, playing in the cool morning air. Rex, though still tired, felt a sense of purpose stirring within him. He had always been a dog who took pride in his role as a protector, a guardian of the home he watched over. As he stood up, shaking the straw from his coat, the youngest child, Emma, ran up to him with a wide grin. She was holding a small bowl of food, the scent of fresh meat wafting through the air. "I made breakfast for you, Rex," she said, her voice bright with excitement. "I hope you like it." Rex's stomach rumbled in response. He hadn't had a proper meal in what felt like an eternity, and the food Emma held out to him was a welcome sight. With a wag of his tail, he eagerly took the bowl from her hands, devouring the meal with a quiet hunger that made Emma giggle. "Good boy!" she exclaimed, her face glowing with joy. Rex looked up at her with gratitude in his eyes, his tail wagging in appreciation. The bond between them had begun to form in that moment. She had saved him from his hunger, and in return, he would protect her and the others with all the loyalty he had left. The farmer, hearing the sound of Rex eating, turned to see his children surrounding the dog. He smiled and wiped his hands on his jeans. "He's a good one," he said, walking over to join them. "Strong, brave, just the kind of dog we need around here." Emma looked up at him with wide eyes. "Can he stay with us forever, Daddy?" The farmer chuckled, his voice full of warmth. "That's up to Rex, sweetheart. But I think he's already made up his mind." Rex looked up at the farmer, his gaze steady and unwavering. In that moment, Rex understood that he had found a new purpose. This was not just a family to protect, it was a new life to embrace. He had always been a protector, a guardian of the land and the people he loved. Now he would do the same for this family, this new home. The days that followed were a blur of new beginnings. Rex quickly settled into the rhythm of farm life. Each morning, he would join the farmer as he worked the fields, his keen eyes always scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Whether it was a stray fox sneaking too close to the chicken coop or a wild animal creeping toward the barn, Rex was always alert, his sharp instincts never failing him. The children, too, found comfort in Rex's presence. They would play in the yard, their laughter echoing through the fields, while Rex watched over them like a silent guardian. He would chase after them, his powerful legs carrying him faster than any of them could run, yet always gentle, always mindful of their safety. They would throw sticks for him to fetch, and in return, he would sit proudly at their feet, waiting for the next game to begin. At night, after the work was done and the stars appeared in the sky, Rex would curl up in the barn, watching over the family as they gathered for dinner. The warmth of the house, the sounds of the children talking and laughing, and the quiet hum of the farm at rest gave him a sense of peace he had never known before. But it wasn't just the family he protected. The barn and the yard, the fields and the animals all became his domain. He would patrol the perimeter of the farm, making sure that no threat, no matter how small, could enter without his knowledge. His instincts, honed over years of serving as a watchdog, were sharper than ever. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Rex heard a rustling sound coming from the nearby woods. His ears perked up, his body tensing as he crouched low to the ground. The animals in the barn seemed to sense his alertness, quieting down as Rex's sharp gaze scanned the shadows of the trees. The farmer, who had been working late in the fields, came up beside Rex. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice calm but curious. Rex didn't bark. He simply stood still, his eyes fixed on the woods, watching, waiting. The silence was broken by a soft growl from Rex, a low rumble that sent a chill through the air. The farmer stood back, recognizing the signs of a threat. "Get inside, kids!" he called out to his children, who were playing near the barn. The children, sensing the tension in the air, quickly ran inside, their laughter turning to hushed whispers. Rex's growl deepened as he moved toward the woods, his muscles coiled and ready. The farmer, having known Rex for only a few weeks, was already impressed by the dog's vigilance and instinct. "Stay close," he whispered, following Rex's lead. The tension in the air was palpable. Something was out there, and Rex wasn't going to let it get any closer. The moon hung high in the sky, casting pale silver light across the fields. The air was thick with anticipation as Rex, still low to the ground, moved silently toward the edge of the woods. His body was a taut bundle of energy, ready to spring into action at any moment. Every instinct in his body was telling him that something dangerous was lurking just beyond the trees. The farmer, though a man of many years and experience, trusted Rex's instincts above all else. He followed the dog closely, but kept a safe distance, knowing that Rex was the one who could see and sense what was hidden in the shadows. The children's laughter had long since faded as they retreated into the house. The quiet of the farm settled in, broken only by the occasional creak of a tree in the wind. Rex's gaze never wavered. His sharp eyes scanned every movement in the shadows, every rustling sound in the underbrush. The woods were eerily silent, but that only heightened Rex's senses. The growl in his throat had softened to a low rumble, but it remained constant, a clear warning to anyone or anything that might be in the area. The farmer, walking cautiously behind him, felt the weight of the tension in the air. He had been on this farm for years and had never felt quite this uneasy before. Something was wrong, but Rex was on guard, and he knew better than to question the dog's judgment. Suddenly, Rex halted, his body rigid as he crouched low to the ground. His ears flattened against his head, his nostrils flaring as he sniffed the air. The farmer took a step forward, peering into the darkness, trying to make out whatever had caught Rex's attention. Then, from the corner of the field, a shadow darted between the trees. Rex's muscles coiled like a spring, and without hesitation, he lunged forward, barking loudly. The sound rang out into the still night, echoing across the fields and into the woods. The farmer's heart skipped a beat as he heard the intensity in Rex's bark, a bark that carried with it an undeniable sense of urgency. The shadow in the trees froze, then quickly retreated deeper into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. Rex, his eyes locked on the movement, stood tall and poised, still growling with the tension of the hunt. He wasn't about to let whatever it was slip away without a fight. "Stay back, Rex," the farmer called, but his voice was too late. The German Shepherd had already sprinted into the woods, his powerful legs cutting through the tall grass and thick underbrush with ease. The farmer, knowing that the dog could handle himself, hesitated for only a moment before running after him. Rex's barking grew louder, more insistent, as he chased the intruder through the woods. The farmer struggled to keep up, his boots crunching on the ground as he pushed through the branches and thick foliage. He could hear the dog up ahead, moving faster, but he had no idea what they were chasing, or what kind of danger lay ahead. When the farmer finally caught up with Rex, he found the dog standing at the edge of a small clearing. The German Shepherd's fur bristled, and he stood between the farmer and whatever lay beyond. Rex's stance was defensive, his body a wall of muscle and strength. His growls were deep and steady, and his eyes were fixed on something in the center of the clearing. The farmer took a cautious step forward, his breath quickening as he tried to see what Rex had found. His gaze followed the dogs, and there, in the clearing, he spotted a pair of glowing eyes, yellow and sharp, reflecting the dim light of the moon. A wild animal. It was crouched low to the ground, its fur sleek and dark against the shadows. A wolf, emaciated and thin, stared back at them, its lips curled in a silent snarl. It was an unusual sight for this part of the countryside. The farmer had never seen a wolf so close to the farm before. The creature seemed desperate, its hunger evident in its hollowed eyes. It was clear the wolf was no longer a threat to the other animals in the barn. It was desperate for food, and it had wandered too close to the farm's boundary. Rex, never one to back down from a challenge, stepped forward with a growl that rattled the trees. The wolf, startled by the sound, lifted its head and bared its teeth, ready to defend itself. The air between the two animals was thick with tension as they stood facing each other, each aware of the other's power, each unwilling to retreat. The farmer stood still, his heart pounding as he watched the standoff unfold. He knew Rex well, knew the dog's fierce loyalty and bravery, but he also knew the danger of an animal like a wolf, especially one desperate enough to venture this close to a human settlement. One wrong move, one mistake, and the situation could spiral out of control. "Rex," the farmer whispered, barely audible over the growls and hisses. "Stay calm, boy." Rex's gaze never left the wolf. His body was poised and ready for action, but he didn't lunge. He stood firm, silently challenging the wild animal to make its move. And the wolf, sensing the dog's strength and determination, began to back away slowly, its sharp eyes still watching Rex. The farmer held his breath, waiting for the next move. After what felt like an eternity, the wolf turned and disappeared into the darkness of the woods, its retreating form vanishing without a sound. Rex stood for a moment longer, still growling softly, before finally relaxing his stance. The danger had passed. The farmer let out a long sigh of relief. He stepped up to Rex, who looked back at him with a sense of pride in his eyes. The dog had protected them once again, showing not only his courage but his deep connection to the land and the people he was sworn to protect. "Well done, boy," the farmer said, patting Rex's side. "You've earned your rest." Rex, his tail wagging gently, turned and followed the farmer back toward the warmth of the barn. The standoff with the wolf had been a close call, but in the end, Rex had proven that he was more than just a farm dog. He was a guardian, a protector, and a member of this new family. As they made their way back to the barn, the farmer couldn't help but smile. He had known from the moment Rex had pulled himself from the floodwaters that the dog was special. But now he understood just how much Rex had to offer. Rex wasn't just a dog. He was home. The following days after the encounter with the wolf seemed to settle into a calm routine. The air had warmed, the floodwaters had receded, and the fields began to dry. Rex had proven himself not only as a protector but as a vital part of the farm, a silent sentinel who watched over the land and the family with unwavering loyalty. His once strange surroundings had now become home, and with each passing day, the bond between him and the family grew stronger. The children were delighted by Rex's presence, showering him with affection and attention every chance they got. They would run to him the moment they saw him, wrapping their arms around his broad shoulders, and Rex, with his patient nature, would gently nudge them with his nose, letting them know he was happy to be near them. In return, he was never far from their side, whether they were playing in the yard or helping their father with chores. He kept a watchful eye on them at all times, his sharp senses attuned to the smallest movements in the environment. Each morning, Rex would accompany the farmer as he worked the land, walking beside him as they inspected the crops or checked the fences. The farmer had grown accustomed to Rex's constant vigilance. No matter where they went, the dog was there, always alert, always aware. Whether it was chasing off a curious fox or making sure the barn doors were secure at night, Rex took his job seriously, never once faltering in his duty. One morning, the farmer stood outside the barn, looking over the fields that stretched for miles in every direction. He smiled, his hand resting on Rex's strong back. It had been a hard few weeks, but things were finally returning to normal. The flood had caused its share of damage, but with hard work and perseverance, the farm had begun to heal. And through it all, Rex had been there, not only helping to protect the land but also reminding the farmer of something far more important. "Boy," the farmer said, looking down at Rex, who sat beside him, "I don't know what we would have done without you." Rex's ears perked up at the sound of the farmer's voice, and he looked up at him, his deep brown eyes filled with loyalty and understanding. The dog's connection to the family was something more than just instinct. It was love, pure and simple. Rex had not only found a home, he had found his place in the world, and he was more than content in that knowledge. Later that afternoon, the children came running toward the field, their laughter carrying on the breeze. They were heading to the woods at the edge of the property, where they had always liked to play. Rex watched them closely, knowing that their energy meant the world to him. They had become his pack, and it was his job to ensure they were always safe. With a bark of encouragement, he trotted ahead of them, eager to show that he was ready to guard them no matter what. The woods, which had once been the site of danger, had now become a place where Rex felt at peace. There was no longer the threat of the wild wolf or the uncertainty that had once filled the air. Now, it was simply another place for Rex to patrol, another domain to protect. The children were safe here, just as they were safe at the barn, at the farmhouse, and in the yard. Every inch of this land was his to protect, and he took his responsibility seriously. The bond between Rex and the family was undeniable. The children began to grow older, and their playtime outside became less frequent, but Rex never stopped guarding them. He would sit by the door at night, waiting for them to return home, his watchful eyes scanning the horizon. They had given him a purpose, a reason to stay strong, and Rex would do whatever it took to ensure that they remained safe. The farmer, too, noticed the change in Rex. The dog had become more than just a farm animal. He was family. The days when Rex had been a lonely, abandoned watchdog were now long behind them, replaced with the comfort and love that only a true home could provide. The farm, which had once seemed empty and quiet without the dog by his side, was now alive with energy and hope. And at the center of it all stood Rex, loyal, fearless, and ever watchful. Years passed, and the seasons came and went. The children grew up, eventually leaving the farm to follow their own paths, but they always returned to visit, bringing their families with them. Each time they came home, Rex was there, his coat graying with age, but his spirit just as strong as ever. The once young pup who had been abandoned by his owners had grown into a wise and noble dog, a protector and a friend who had seen the farm through every storm, both literal and metaphorical. And so, when the time came, as all times eventually do, for Rex to grow old and rest, the family was ready. They had been with him through every chapter of his life, through the flood, through the fears, and through the joys, and they were ready to honor his memory with the same love and care he had shown them for all those years. Rex's body may have grown tired, but his spirit lived on in the hearts of the family he had protected, in the fields he had guarded, and in the barn where he had first found his second chance. The farm remained a place of love and laughter, a place where the memories of Rex, the loyal, brave, and ever-watchful German Shepherd, would live on forever. He had been more than a dog. He had been a part of the heart and soul of the farm. And though his paws no longer trod the earth, his spirit, like the land itself, would endure. The end of one chapter marked the beginning of another, one where Rex's legacy would be carried forward in the stories the family told, the lessons they passed on, and the love they shared. Because sometimes, home isn't just a place. It's the heart of the ones you love, and the dog who watches over it all.